Welcome to Prayer Journaling through Bosler Library. I am Michelle Williams and I'm happy you joined us for session 8. This session is titled Bracing for Impact. In the previous session, we talked about giving up, specifically giving ourselves and whole lives to God. We heard stories of Daniel and the lion and more on lions to remind us how God's plan can unfold in each of us when we surrender and trust our lives to Him. In this session, we will talk about bracing for impact, waiting for God's promises and plans to come into view. How do we prepare ourselves to be ready when God reveals His plan to us? What do we need to do in the meantime while we're waiting? How will God carry us through times of turmoil and trouble to get to His promises? In the book of Genesis, we read the story of Abram, whom God called when he was 75 years old. His wife Sarai was 70 at the time. They lived with their extended family in Haran. God said to Abram, "Go from here, take everyone in your family, all your possessions, and I will build from you a great nation." He obeyed God and left his homeland of Haran to go to the land of Canaan. Did this promise from God even make sense? How could they at their age possibly be the parents of a nation? Abram and Sarai were childless. God also said, "I will bless you and make your name great. I will bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you. All people on the earth will be blessed because of you." God laid before Abram a lofty vision of the future for him, his family, his people, his nation, and the world. It was a few decades and many encounters with God before Abram started to see the first fruits of God's promises. Abram was 99 years old when God appeared to him to reaffirm the original promise. God said, "I am God. Be faithful and blameless in my sight, and I will keep my promise to you and increase your descendants." Abram fell face down onto the ground. God reiterated his plan. "You will now be called Abraham. You are the father of many nations. I will make whole nations out of you. Kings will descend from you. I have made a covenant with you, and my covenant will transcend to your descendants. I am your God, and I will be their God. This land I have led you to, Canaan, will be a gift to you and your descendants. I will be their God. As for your wife Sarai," God continued, "in a year she will bear you a son, who will be named Isaac. I will have the same covenant with him as I do with you. All my promises to you will be passed down to your son and generations more. Sarai will now be known as Sarah." Abraham fell on his face and laughed. He laughed at the idea he, at 99 years old, and his wife Sarah, 94 years old, would have a son. He laughed at God's words. God assured him, "Sarah will indeed give birth to a son, and she shall be mother to nations and have descendants of kings." Abraham responded and inquired, "What about Ishmael? Will you bless him as well?" Ishmael was Abraham's oldest son through Sarah's servant woman Hagar, a woman from Egypt. After Sarah found herself childless, she gave her servant Hagar to Abraham to have a child in her stead. Hagar was visited by an angel who told her to name the child Ishmael. Hagar gave birth to Ishmael when Abraham was 86 years old. Sarah soon gave in to jealousy and turned on the woman. Despite Sarah's jealousy issues, Abraham loved Ishmael and celebrated his milestones until he was a teenager around the time of Isaac's birth. Sarah's vices grew with the birth of Isaac, and her jealousy forced Hagar and Ishmael to leave the family encampment and venture on their own. God did not abandon them. God heard Abraham's plea. He not only protected Ishmael and Hagar, but indeed blessed Ishmael with many descendants and nations. If you remember the story of Joseph, his brothers sold him to the Ishmaelites, the descendants of Ishmael. God fulfilled his promises to Abraham and the nation of Israel, but it took a long time. For Abraham, he was over 100 years old before Isaac was born. Sarah was 95. He had first heard God's promises 25 years prior. During that time, Abraham developed a close and personal relationship with God. Hundreds of years after Abraham, God's people finally were given the land of Canaan promised to him and his descendants. The nation of Israel had to go through so much to get to the promised land: famine, slavery in Egypt, 40 years of wandering in the desert, and war. God kept his promises, yet his people suffered many trials and tribulations before and after. God never said his plans will be swift or come in the form we believe it should. He may lay out plans that make us laugh and fall to the ground. We may have to wait much longer than we anticipate and not really see the fruit of his promise in our lifetime. But his promises are true and faithful. He does not change. He is the same God to us as he was with Abraham, personable and close, faithful and encouraging. He is the same God to us as he was with Joseph, David, and Jacob. He hears our prayers and wants to talk with us, hear our hearts, and show us. He is, was, and always will be the creator of the universe, our creator without end. In this last session, I want to share with you about the immortal jellyfish. According to Wikipedia, the immortal jellyfish can technically live forever. For the immortal jellyfish, they start their lives as larvae, spinning around in the ocean and settle on the bottom of the sea. They become stationary polyps before transforming into swimming, full-grown medusas we see in the oceans. When the immortal jellyfish goes through a stressful time in its environment or due to predators, it reverts back to its tiny polyp stage and begins again. It manipulates its cellular structure to become newborn again. It can do this forever if not eaten by other animals. The immortal jellyfish is subject to many scientific studies for medical research and tapping into the secret of staying young. The immortal jellyfish braces for impact by changing and becoming a brand new creation. Remember the immortal jellyfish when we face times of trials and struggles. Reverting back to our state of communion with God should be our natural default. Let's brace for impact and be faithful as Abraham did. Live a good life, loving God, communing and praying with him, listening for his voice, and giving ourselves over to his plan. We will find God's strength in our weakness, separate our wants and needs, understand the desire of our hearts, find clarity, assess and use our time wisely, build our prayer life, give ourselves up to him, and continue to brace for the impact of God's plan for our lives. We're happy you joined us for this and all the sessions of prayer journaling through Bosler Library. Look for more classes offered through Carlisle Institute for Lifelong Learning at Bosler Memorial Library. For continued spiritual growth, find a local church offering small group and Sunday school classes. You are welcome to join us at Carlisle United Methodist Church. Find the link in the description. Whatever you choose to do, I hope you find out more about yourself and have a better understanding of God in your life. I also hope you see God working in you, around you, and through you to help you become the person He created you to be.